welcome to episode 21 of The Smallest Thing. I'm Lisa Manterfield. It's fire season here in Northern California, a worrying time of year under the best of circumstances. This year, a warm spring and bouts of hot weather have made for high-risk fire conditions. Last weekend saw 100-degree temperatures and dry lightning storms that contributed to a number of fires and some local evacuations. This year we have the added complication of evacuating during a pandemic. I'll tell you more about this later in the show. But first, Em gets a birthday surprise in this week's episode of The Smallest Thing. Welcome to the serialized audiobook, The Smallest Thing, written by Lisa Manterfield, read for you by Charlie Sanderson.
Chapter 21, Monday, August the 15th. Today is my 18th birthday. I'd envisioned Deb taking the train in, the two of us dressing to the nines and having afternoon tea at the Savoy, then Ro and me hopping from club to club, coming home to our little flat on the first morning tube. In my wildest fantasy, my parents, having fully accepted my decision to leave, would have come down to take us out for a meal in Covent Garden. I never pictured turning 18 shut in the house with Dad. There doesn't seem much point in getting out of bed. I stare up at the patterns in the textured ceiling of my room, watching the shadows shift as the morning sun makes its way across my bedroom window. Happy birthday to me, I think, but I can't muster any enthusiasm to celebrate. By the window sits the stack of boxes, still packed for my move to London. All my plans and dreams for the future boxed up with nowhere to go. Deb should be getting ready to leave too, preparing for Freshers' Week at Oxford, making new friends, starting her life, not trapped in a virus-ridden village. Eventually, there's nothing good left to think about, and I have no option but to go downstairs. I'll make my pilgrimage to see Deb, which I've been doing daily since she was admitted to the low-prob tent, and I hope I don't run into Aidan. I can't stand the torture of being close to him but kept so far apart. Better I don't see him at all. Dad stops me at the bottom of the stairs with a curt, "Morning." He tells me there's tea in the pot and offers me a cup. He doesn't mention my birthday, but I can't be upset. There are much more important things to worry about now. I go to take a seat at the kitchen table, but Dad ushers me into the living room instead. There's an air of seriousness about him that leads me to think he has bad news to break, although these days bad news is so commonplace it no longer warrants a living room talk. As I wander into the living room clutching my tea, something seems out of place. It takes me a minute to register the burst of colour around the table. Strung across the window are chains of coloured paper, like we used to make in school, and a clutch of multicoloured balloons hangs from the ceiling. On the table, glass jars are filled with every kind of flower imaginable. Loose rose petals scattered around them like snow. There are a small stack of cards, some in regular envelopes, others in what appear to be folded magazine pages, and 3 brightly wrapped boxes. In the middle of the table sits a cake, the top smeared in pure white icing, bright jam oozing from its centre. Someone has written 18 in tiny alpine strawberries. I gape at my dad, unable to find the right words. He grins at me. "Happy birthday, Emmy." He hasn't called me that in years, and the gentle sound of my pet name wraps itself around me. I can't comprehend all this. I can't fathom how he put this together, or even that he thought to put it together. And he made a cake. "How did you—" I stammer. "I had a lot of help," he says, pointing out each item and listing off the villagers who contributed ideas, materials and time. The Ashton kids who made the paper chains, the neighbours who cut flowers from their gardens for Elizabeth Mompesson to arrange, and those who gave up their scarce rations of sugar, flour and eggs. "And Mrs. Glover made the cake," he says. "Mrs. Glover? But she hates me." "Why would she do that?" "People care about you, I suppose." He gives me a wry smile. "Imagine that." I do imagine it, and the notion brings with it an unfamiliar sense of peace and belonging. Dad and I have strawberry cake for breakfast, and we agree that it's absolutely divine. I open the cards, a mix of generic greetings and homemade numbers, some drawn, some collaged with cut-out pictures, and one painted in watercolours. Each has a note from someone in the village, wishing me a happy birthday, a long life, and good fortune. For a few minutes I soak in the warm feelings and the belief that everything in my life is as it should be. Then I open the gifts. A box of scented soaps from our neighbours over the fence, a pair of socks from another neighbour. Dad hands me the last box, patchily wrapped in a piece of shiny paper that's not quite big enough, and tied with a creased ribbon. "From me," he says. I undo the bow and peel off the layers of tape to uncover a small leather-bound box. I throw Dad a questioning look, but he encourages me to open it, so I ease off the lid. Inside is a pendant, a miniature statue of a woman in perfect gold and green detail, no bigger than the tip of my thumb. She's perched on a gold swing, hands clutching the chains and a green dress swirling around her legs. Flaxen hair and a pair of green and gold wings flutter behind her. The overall effect is one of freedom and abandon. "It was your great-grandma Siddle's," he says. "You know her name was also Emma." "I know," I say. "This was passed down to my sister, your Auntie Sandra, but your grandma thought it should go to you someday." "Thank you," I say. "That means a lot." "I'm not sure if it's your style, and you don't have to wear it, but I wanted you to have it." "I love it," I say. "She's beautiful." I unclasp the chain and hand it to Dad, turning my back so he can place it around my neck. I feel the pendant rest against my skin, the tiny woman arcing under my collarbone. "What do you think?" I ask, turning back to show Dad. He pinches his lips into a look that says he's at a loss for words. "I love you, Em," he says at last. "I might not always be good at showing it, but I want you to know." "I love you too, Dad." "I've been thinking, maybe I should cut back on my visits, just for a while, until we're sure we're out of the woods." I almost tell him I think it's a good idea, but then I catch sight of the gifts, the balloons, the flowers and the cake, and I understand now what a difference a small gesture can make. What a big difference my neighbours' gestures have made to my day, and what a difference Dad's visits have made to theirs. "It's up to you," I say, "but maybe now is when they need you more than ever." Dad considers me for a moment, then says, "First day of being 18 and you really are an adult." He hovers for a moment like there's more he needs to say, but he's already said more than he's ever said before. "So," he says finally, his tone changing to playful, "how are you going to spend your big day?" I think about it for a moment, crossing off all the things I'd like to do and narrowing it down to not much. "I think I'll have a bath and binge watch cartoons, then drop in on Deb," I say, "and maybe have more cake for lunch." "Sounds like a plan." He starts gathering up our dishes. "Don't forget to give your mum a ring too," he adds on his way out. I want to protest that it's my birthday and I shouldn't have to do anything I don't want to do. But now I'm officially an adult, I need to act like one. Mum and I chat for a few minutes, but my side of the conversation is clipped. I ask her about her quarantine and how Alice is coping. She offers reassuring answers that they are both doing fine and, more importantly, they're both healthy. "I wish I could be there for you today," she says. I don't want to spoil my 18th with an argument, but I feel one coming on. "If your friend Mark was going to pull those strings, now would be a really great time." "He can't," she says, her voice tinged with regret. "Not anymore. Can't or won't. Can't, Mark's being quarantined too." It doesn't make sense, and I'm about to ask why they do that when Mark hasn't been anywhere near our village, but then I think about the pictures I found, and all my questions are answered. They've quarantined Mark like they quarantined Ro, because Mark is Mum's level 4. Suddenly I see my mother clearly. Like the blighted ivy on the old vicarage, she covered our family in a lush protective shield. We looked good from the outside, but when they pulled her away, she took the structure of our family with her. Well, my voice quavers as I suck back all I want to say about my mother's behaviour. This is my day, and I'm not going to let her ruin it. That's that then. I'm so sorry, Mum says. Emma, But I cut the conversation short. Whatever she feels she needs to say, today is not the day I want to hear it. I raid Mum's expensive toiletries, despite a niggling suspicion that they were probably gifts from Mark, and take a long soak in the bath. As hard as I try to focus on the amazing birthday my dad has put together, my mind won't stop wandering to the scattered mess that is my family. I don't know what stings the most. The fact that Mum has been seeing Mark again, or that Dad is under the illusion that everything is all right. Everything I once believed about the people who raised me is falling apart at the seams. Years ago, when we were maybe 10, Deb asked me a hypothetical question as we were walking to school one day. If one of your parents had to die and you had to choose which one, who would it be? I refused to make the choice, but when she goaded me into it, I picked Dad. I imagined life without each of my parents, and things always looked a little bit easier with Mum still around. I thought that if Mum were gone, there'd be no one to take care of me, no one I could confide in, no one I could trust. But I had it all wrong, because I never imagined Mum would leave me. I never thought she'd lie to me. I thought that if she had to, she'd do whatever it took to save me. I never would have believed I could be so wrong, and I never could have imagined that my dad would fill those needs.
Welcome back. Fire season is no joke here in Sonoma County, where I live. In 2017, the Tubbs fire swept over a ridge to the east of our city and burned through several residential neighborhoods. By the time the fire was fully contained, some 3 weeks later, it had burned almost 37,000 acres, destroyed more than 5,600 structures, more than half of which were homes, and was responsible for the loss of at least 22 lives. In 2018, we spent 2 weeks living under a smoky blanket from the Paradise Fire 100 miles away. And last year, the Kincaid Fire burned 77,000 acres just north of us, prompting the evacuations of almost 200,000 people. Last year was particularly terrifying as the city was prepared with evacuation protocol, moving people out zone by zone to make sure everyone could get out safely. As high winds fueled the fire, zones 1 to 10 came under evacuation orders. We live in zone 11. This year we've been warned the fire risk is high due to extended hot, dry conditions, so we're preparing again to evacuate if necessary. But the pandemic has brought additional considerations. How safe is it to go to a shelter when we know we shouldn't gather in large groups? How can you ask friends for temporary accommodation when they have been working to keep themselves safe? Clearly, if the choice is between risking infection or facing down a wildfire, we will evacuate. Our city and county officials have plans in place to provide social distancing and safe protocols in community shelters. We are also scoping out hotels away from the area, and we've talked to friends who are willing to take us in a pinch. We have our bug-out bags with the usual essential documents and a week's worth of clothes, but we'll also be packing bedding and cleaning supplies and extra gloves and masks just in case. Of course, we're hoping none of these scenarios happen, and that fire season passes without event. But hope isn't really a viable plan, and so we're making preparations. The whole thing adds an extra layer of worry to an already anxious time. But our community has shown great resilience in past events, and we will get through this again. Here's looking forward to Thanksgiving and some cool, rainy weather. Until next week, stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Smallest Thing. To make sure you don't miss next week's episode, you can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more. If you'd like to support the show, please leave a review and share this series with others you think might enjoy it. If you're on Instagram, tag me there at LisaManterfield_, or follow me on Facebook at author Lisa Manterfield and Twitter at Lisa Manterfield. My newsletter subscribers are always the first to know about my news, events, upcoming releases, giveaways, and more. Sign up for monthly delivery at lisamanterfield.com/subscribe and get your complimentary copy of Love, Loss and Letting Go, 3 of my short stories. Thanks to Justin Joseph for producing and editing this show, and to Ketsa.uk for the music. That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening.